clothes. Hi, it's Abheeti here from Clothesline, and I'm speaking again today with Dorian of BuildSort. We are talking about the situation in Genova with the collapse of the bridge, but before we did that, for anyone who hasn't heard Chris speak before, I wondered if you could tell the listeners what BuildSort does and how it solves problems in our community.
So BuildSort is helping the building supply chain, basically everyone involved in building construction. We kind of link them all together, we help them share their data. Do we have to do that again?
We do. Sorry, peeps. We're recording on Zencaster and Abby screwed up for the third time. So, it's Abby here from Clothesline. I'm here. Sorry, people watching. We're going to have to do this again. It's Abby here from Clothesline, and I'm speaking again to Chris Dorian today. We interviewed him a few weeks ago, and with the collapse of the Genova Bridge, Amy Rose, also a building designer, thought it would be a really good idea to come down and chat to Chris here at their business premises, which we're doing. And so before we talk about the situation and the collapse of the bridge in Genova, I wanted to speak to Chris and ask him just to explain again to listeners what BuildSort does.
So BuildSort is helping the whole building industry, building and construction. We help with the supply chain, but also all the design and making sure that data flows a lot more seamlessly, which can really help with productivity within the industry as well.
So when we were speaking in the interview, you talked about the fact that the industry is very fragmented and that all the different parts of the industry which are really necessary and heavily regulated as well, which when we talk about Genoa you'll see why, but that they don't necessarily communicate with each other. So
no, yeah, they've all got their own incentives, so architects and engineers are only incentivised to get to a building approvals process. However, there's a lot of data that they have which can be used for everyone else down in the supply chain. So that's one aspect, and then there's like all of the different subcontractors involved. They also have like their program of when they can be at site, and so they can update that and keep everything flowing. And then you've got your material suppliers, so they're at the end of the chain and they're probably the most in the dark of what is actually going on and what is the demand of all the materials. Now if we put all of that information together, so we've got the quantities and specifications and when things are needed on building sites, you can actually do this thing called just-in-time manufacturing, and that can really make things so much more productive. And
so that's when you're creating materials exactly to scale, exactly how much you need without too much offcuts, too much wastage.
Just as you need them.
Right, and that's reducing landfill and all of those byproducts.
So much more, yeah. So you can do a lot of more prefabrication of things, and you can really reduce a lot of waste.
Awesome. So we thought as a juncture, as an addition to the work that we did with Chris some weeks ago, with the Genova bridge collapse, I shared with you, because we're on a Telegram chat group, that I lived for many years in Genova. That was the city where I learned Italian, and my first husband died. I had a very, very strong emotional heart connection. I still do. I have friends and family still living in that city, and when I found out about the crash, it instantly brought me to tears, or the bridge collapsing, I should say. And there were, I was instantly looking for people on Facebook and making sure that people were safe. So that's my sort of connection to the city. We were planning a visit at Christmas, and I hope we can still manage that as a family, and that obviously colours the experience. And the people in Genova are very shocked. They're absolutely shocked that in a developed country, especially a country so famous for its architecture, that this sort of tragedy could happen. And if I just wanted to add one thing, because in our interview I talked to you about the house from the 14th century that my partner and I refurbished. We completely restructured it actually. It took us a year and a half. And that still had the plumbing that was laid by the ancient Italians. I don't know, there is no such thing as ancient Italians, I'm thinking of ancient Greeks, but the Romans, thank you, to cut that bit out. But basically, so you've got sewage systems, you've got infrastructure, you've got engineering, which is absolutely amazing. And my mind went straight to that when I saw the Genova crash, bridge collapse. I was thinking, how is it possible?
Well, I've just been doing a bit more research on that and been reading a little bit, and it looks like the mafia may have been involved during the construction, and back in those times when that kind of thing used to happen there, that they'd try and scrimp on some of the materials.
Right.
So putting in concrete with less cement inside it. So that can cause weaker concrete. So this is like all speculation, of course.
Sure,
we don't actually know. I'm sure it's all going to come out in the wash.
Or maybe not.
Or maybe not. Well, when people die, that generally becomes quite public. So
It does, but when you're uncovering what the mafia does, there are interesting ways of sewing up the truth. But I hope that's not the case, but I'm just being a cynic because I lived there for so many years.
Yeah, so 43 people lost their lives there. So you'd hope that it becomes a pretty public inquest.
Yes.
So when concrete does get lean mixes, it weakens the concrete. However, when you design structures as well, you also try and design them so that they fail in the steel, the reinforcement steel that's within the concrete, rather than the concrete, because otherwise you could get some really sudden, collapses, and that could explain some of the reports that said that there was, thunderclaps or something like that.
So it's like something just cracked.
It just cracked, and they're very sudden. So you always try and, as a structural engineer, you're always trying to design for the tensile or ductile failure rather than the compressive failure.
And so when you say you design to fail, obviously you don't want it to fail, but
course,
what you're saying is like with the
there's
steel that you can see corrosion or you can see signs
you see
of
it
aging,
bending,
signs
and
of
you'd see lots of
stress.
cracks and
Yeah.
stresses.
So you'd know that needs to be closed, that structure needs to be replaced
Exactly.
before you can move
you get a lot of warning.
Wow, all right. So that was the latest findings you looked up this morning.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
yeah.
it's and looks like there's about 12 bridges in recent years
Wow.
with similar conditions in Italy.
So I'm wondering if the post-war sort of Italian reconstruction, a lot of those tenders, if that's what they were, might not have been actually, held in that way, but that if they were passed on to these big construction groups, which were basically, organised by larger organisations.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, so where BuildSort could probably help with this, in our second stage, we're looking at the supply of the provenance of where the materials are coming from, and have they been tested, and when they go into these structures, making sure that every box is ticked.
Yes.
Because we'll have all the specifications first off, so that's our initial thing that we're trying to attack, and then once you get the provenance coming through, you can join the two together to see that it's all being done up to standards.
So when you say provenance and supply chain, just to unpack that for people, that is really from the very first ideation stage right through to the construction of the building. Is that what you mean, or the bridge?
Yeah. So in a typical supply chain, if you think about there's a company called Beef Ledger, where they're doing from paddock to plate with steak. So that is one version of the supply chain. The construction supply chain is so much more difficult.
Yeah.
Because
so many different players.
So first of all, there's the person who's ordering the materials is not the person who actually specifies them all, because there's architects and engineers, building surveyors, energy assessors, bushfire assessors. There's a whole range of people involved. Now they come up with all of the design.
Yes.
And then goes to a builder, and they tender it out, and then they get all the materials that come through the supply chain, and hopefully they match up.
Yes.
So we're attacking it from the other end, where we're looking at where the ordering is happening first.
Okay.
And then where the provenance comes from, so where all the materials come from at a later date.
Right.
And that's where we could definitely help with something like Genoa.
And so that means that there's accountability, like you can see at which point the erroneous products or the bad recipe, if that's what the case was in this case, has actually, like, you can basically say the buck stops here.
Exactly. So with the likes of concrete, the batch is mixed up very quickly. They take a sample, generally on a building site, of that mix as it's pouring out, and then that goes off to a lab and it gets tested 28 days later. So it's in the best interest to make sure that it passes those tests.
And does that mean that all of those tests are then recorded in a blockchain format so that they can be traced?
That's what we're planning on having.
And so for those of you that are not familiar, blockchain is an immutable ledger system where information is stored and it can't be tampered with and it can't be changed. Although you can address a current blockchain with, like a previous blockchain, you can readdress that with, you can update it with following blockchains. So you might say, okay, this, correct me if I'm wrong, please, waving, not drowning, that if, say for example, the cement mix was checked 28 days later and it was found to be not strong enough, then they could change that recipe, so to speak. I'm using layman's terms.
it would be a very expensive process.
So they wouldn't use that cement until 28 days has passed.
So it becomes like an incentive kind of thing, like mining with Bitcoin, because it's more expensive to do the wrong thing than it is to do the right thing.
Right. So it's
that bit of game theory.
Okay, so that's trustless thing creating trust, so to speak.
Because otherwise you'd have to break down what you've just built and bring in more formwork, more steel. That's much more expensive than just supplying the right concrete.
Okay, great. So doing the right thing in the first place, basically. Paying,
exactly.
What is it? I think Amy Rose likes this saying, a pound of... Like basically, if you do the right thing now, you save money in the long run. Like a stitch in nine saves time. I sound like a granny now, but yeah. Well, thank you very much for talking to us today, Chris.
No problem.
Any closing comments?
No, thanks for having me. You're putting me on the spot.
Thanks for the coffee.